She walked onto the field, wearing a faded t-shirt and secondhand sneakers, surrounded by million-dollar gear and players dressed in luxury sponsorships. They laughed at her bat, whispered about her clothes, and called her a joke before the game even began. But when she hit the first home run of the tournament, the laughter stopped cold. Then in front of the entire stadium, a billionaire stepped out from the VIP pavilion, wrapped his arm around her and said, "That's my wife." The same woman they had all mocked was not only the co-founder of the league, but the reason it existed at all. In a single afternoon, Elena Brooks exposed the arrogance of the elite and reminded everyone what true strength looks like. If powerful stories like this move, you make sure to subscribe for more emotional and unforgettable moments. What happens when quiet dignity meets public humiliation and wins? Stay with us, because this is a story you won't forget. The sun beat down over Sierra Ridge Park. Then she stepped onto the field. No entrance music, no camera spotlight, no designer cleats clicking on the marble-lined dugout. Just Elena Brooks. The laughter started softly, a ripple in the expensive air. Then came the snickers. "Did someone order Postmates?" A tall girl in custom Lululemon gear whispered to her friend, "I think she's here to clean the benches." Another muttered, biting into a fig and goat cheese energy bar. Elena kept walking. She didn't look up. She didn't flinch. Her canvas sneakers made almost no sound on the perfectly manicured turf. But each step seemed to echo in the hearts of those watching, some with contempt, others with curiosity. The scoreboard hadn't even lit up yet, but the whispers in the grandstand were a game of their own. Maybe she got lost. Who led her onto the field? In the dugout, a semi-pro player with a glittering championship ring leaned forward and narrowed her eyes. Camille Sloan. "This isn't a public fitness class," Camille said loudly, making sure her voice carried. "Someone tell her there's a batting cage behind the park where the actual beginners." Another girl nudged her teammate, who burst out laughing and high-fived her. Maybe she won a raffle. The announcer hadn't even called names yet, but Elena was already being benched by reputation alone. What they didn't see, what they didn't want to see, was the quiet in her eyes. The stillness of someone who'd spent more hours swinging a bat in dusty lots than any of them had spent in sponsored gyms. Her fingers curled gently around the wooden handle, not in defense, but in memory. And as she stepped into the batting zone to warm up alone and unwelcome, the weight of every whisper followed her like a storm cloud. But Elena didn't come to impress them. She came to swing. As Elena adjusted her grip on the bat, a crisp wind moved through Sierra Ridge Park, fluttering the pristine sponsor banners hanging from every grandstand. Names like Versace, Rolex, and Nike shimmered in the sun, branding the air as much as the tournament. And yet, in the middle of all that gloss, there stood one woman who didn't shine. At least not in the way they expected. She took a soft practice swing, her stance steady as behind her, the laughter grew louder. "She's not even wearing cleats," one of the socialites scoffed from the dugout, the rhinestones on her hat sparkling with every head turn. "That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." From a bench lined in velvet, Camille Sloan. "I heard she's from Michigan." "Some middle-of-nowhere place," a voice answered, laced with mockery. "Probably still uses dial-up." "Oh," Camille smirked. "A small-town charity case that explains the Thrift-Store bat." Elena stood at the edge of the practice zone, her back straight, her eyes following the slow roll of a ball across the turf. She didn't reply, she didn't argue, she just breathed. That irritated them more. Rich girls in $6,000 matching gear, athletes with diamond-studded wristbands, even staffers in tailored jackets all found her silence offensive. They didn't understand how someone could withstand ridicule without shrinking, without fighting back, without needing to. A tech heiress leaned toward her friend, her designer sunglasses glinting. "This tournament is supposed to be exclusive. What's the point of all the sponsors if just anyone can wander in? Maybe she's filming a social experiment." Another giggled. "Like how poor people think." They erupted into laughter, heads thrown back, polished nails clapping over glossed lips. Some even pulled out their phones, capturing quick videos, no doubt to post later with ironic hashtags and mocking captions. Still, Elena remained still, not stoic, not cold, just grounded. The kind of stillness that isn't learned in luxury gyms or media training. The kind of quiet forged in early mornings, cracked pavement, and 1,000 unnoticed hours of practice. She raised the bat once more and let it rest against her shoulder. The voices swirled behind her like bees drunk on their own honeyed spite. But Elena didn't listen to the noise. She listened to the wind, and somewhere in the crowd, deep in the grandstands, one man in a gray suit watched expression unreadable. The tournament hadn't started yet, but the real game had already begun. If Sierra Ridge Park had a crown jewel, it was Vivian Sterling, daughter of Madison Sterling, the woman behind America's largest sports media empire. Vivian was more than just an athlete. She was the face of the elite. Every year she was the first name on the roster and the last one standing on the podium. Her Nike custom jersey glimmered under the spring sun like armor forged in Manhattan boardrooms. She sauntered onto the field, every step, deliberate, trailed by an entourage that carried her water bottle, her phone, and her eco. And then she saw Elena Vivian's mouth curled into a slow, practiced smile, the kind that never reached her eyes. "Oh," she said loudly, drawing attention with the same skill she drew. "Endorsement deals. Is this bring your assistant to work day?" Elena didn't flinch. She stood by the warm-up zone, eyes steady, weight balanced, her fingers drummed lightly on her bat, not from nerves but from rhythm. Vivian approached, flanked by Camille and two other players dressed like they'd walked off a luxury lookbook. "That bat looks like it came from a garage sale." Vivian said, her voice crisp, sharp, polished like glass. "And those shoes? I've seen better soles on hospital interns." Camille laughed on cue. The others joined in. Their voices rippled across the field, bouncing off velvet-lined dugouts and mirrored pavilions. "She probably thinks hustle is enough," Vivian added, brushing imaginary dust off her embroidered sleeve, as if heartbeat's legacy. Elena said nothing. Vivian leaned a little closer. "I hope you're not planning to play," she whispered. "This field isn't just grass and dirt, sweetheart. It's history, bloodlines, contracts, generations of winners. It's not for charity cases." From the sidelines, a field coordinator glanced nervously toward them, but said nothing. No one ever interrupted Vivian Sterling, not even umpires. The silence between them thickened. Vivian stepped back, tossing her sleek blonde bob. The air around her smelled faintly of jasmine, an expensive perfume line with her own name on it. Elena's nose crinkled, not at the scent, at the memory. Graham hated that perfume. The thought stirred something. Elena looked up slowly, her hazel eyes meeting Vivian's icy blue ones. There was no anger in her gaze, just gravity. Just a silence so deep it made noise feel cheap. Vivian's smirk faltered just for a heartbeat. But that was enough. The wind shifted in the grandstand. Someone whispered, "Why isn't she fighting back?" And someone else replied, "Maybe she doesn't need to." Elena took a single step forward, her bat at her side. The queen had spoken, but the girl in the faded shirt hadn't even begun. The velvet rope wasn't just literal at Sierra Ridge Park, it was everywhere. Invisible boundaries carved the field into two worlds, those who belonged and those who didn't. And if Elena Brooks was anything in their eyes, it was the latter. She stood near the dugout, rolling her shoulders softly. Eyes closed for a brief moment, her fingers ran across the seams of her bat, the grain as familiar to her as breathing. Then came the sound of heels clicking on turf. Margaret Ellison, senior coordinator of the tournament, in her blazer pressed so sharp it could have sliced, leather walked with the slow, purposeful authority of someone who believed in order. She was 52, a proud enforcer of the rules, and her rulebook never bent for strangers. Miss Margaret began, her voice firm but polished like marble. "I'm going to have to ask you to step off the field." Elena turned. Margaret offered a tight-lipped smile, though her eyes held none of its warmth. "This zone is for registered athletes only." She continued, holding a sleek clipboard close to her chest like a badge of status. "We can't have spectators interfering with warm-ups." Spectators. The word echoed like a slap. "I'm not interfering," Elena said calmly. Margaret's smile twitched. Nevertheless, she replied, gesturing toward the exit tunnel. "This is a curated event. Participation is by invitation and credentials." From the stands, applause broke out, not for talent, but for protocol. A few wealthy guests clapped, amused at the polite dismissal. Someone shouted, "Send her back to the parking lot." Laughter erupted. A CEO in a $4,000 athletic kit added, probably filming one of those underdog TikToks. "What's next? A documentary deal." Camille Sloan, watching from the bench, smirked. Someone tell her this isn't an open mic night. Still, Elena didn't move. I'm here to play, she said quietly. Margaret stiffened. Then produce your registration badge. Elena didn't reach for her lanyard, didn't protest. She just stood there, bat resting calmly in her hand, like an old friend. Vivian Sterling, now leaning casually against the dugout, called out with mock concern. We don't typically allow charity entries. Margaret, rules are rules. The crowd laughed again. Staffers exchanged knowing glances. Margaret stepped closer, her voice lowering. Miss, you're embarrassing yourself. Elena's eyes met hers, level and unblinking. Not yet, she said softly. Margaret blinked, uncertain if it was a threat, a promise, or both. From the grandstand, a few spectators had stopped laughing. Something about the woman on the field no longer looked lost. She looked patient, anchored. As Margaret turned to signal security, a figure in the VIP pavilion rose to his feet, quietly unnoticed. The balance of power was beginning to shift, but no one knew it yet. The air above Sierra Ridge Park shimmered with heat, but the tension crackling across the field was ice cold and sharp. Elena Brooks hadn't moved, not when the officials dismissed her, not when the crowd laughed, not even when Margaret Ellison called her an embarrassment to her face. She stood at the edge of the batter's box, shoulders relaxed, her thrifted bat hanging loosely in one hand. But her silence now had a pulse, a presence. It made the ones in charge nervous. And Vivian Sterling, queen of the tournament crown, still firmly on her blonde head, couldn't stand it. You're really gonna pretend like you belong here, Vivian called out, stepping forward from the dugout. Elena looked up slowly, the way a storm might glance before deciding to touch down. Vivian's voice grew louder, sharper, meant for the cameras and the spectators sipping champagne in the shaded upper levels. Fine, let's settle it with a wager, she said, tossing her hair back. The crowd perked up. If you strike out 3 times, Vivian continued pacing toward the pitcher's mound. With performative grace, you'll drop to your knees right here in front of the press and say, I don't deserve to be on this field. Gasps rippled through the grandstand. The laughter was quieter now, replaced by the thrill of public stakes, the kind that either ends in triumph or ruin. Elena didn't flinch. She raised an eyebrow and asked, and if I hit a home run? Vivian froze for a moment. She hadn't expected a return serve. The crowd leaned in, phones were raised, drones hovered like curious birds. If I hit the first home run of the game, Elena said, voice, even you, walk off this field, immediately, in front of everyone. A collective murmur swept the audience. Vivian scoffed, her smile returning brittle this time. You won't even hit the ball. I'll take that as a yes, Elena replied, lifting her bat and stepping toward the plate. Camille Sloan barked out a laugh from the sidelines. This'll be quick. Does she even know how to swing another player? Muttered. But not everyone was laughing anymore. Some leaned forward, drawn in by the calm in Elena's voice, by the certainty that didn't match her outfit or her bat. This wasn't confidence, it was something deeper. Vivian spun the ball in her hand and called out, then swing, rookie. Let's give them a show. Elena turned slightly, her eyes scanning the sky above the scoreboard, not looking for a sign, but measuring the wind. And in the distance in the glass-walled pavilion, Graham Brooks leaned against the railing, his gray suit soft in the light, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He knew the weight of her swing better than anyone. The stadium fell into a rare silence. Not a phone buzzed, not a glass clinked in the luxury pavilion. Even the sponsors' drones buzzing overhead like mechanical hornets seemed to pause. Mid-air. Elena Brooks stepped into the batter's box. No music, no cheer squad, no fanfare. Just the crunch of gravel beneath her worn sneakers and the quiet rhythm of her breath. Across the mound, Vivian Sterling spun the ball once in her hand, then twice, her painted nails flashing in the sun. Her stance was perfect. Pitching lessons with Team USA coaches had made her deadly efficient, predictable. She wound back, the pitch came, fast right down the middle. Arrogant crack. The sound was clean, not loud, but sharp like a whip crack across glass. The ball soared past second base, cutting the wind as it sliced across the field. A line drive, not a home run. But enough to stop the laughter. Enough to turn heads. The crowd collectively leaned forward. Vivian's smirk wavered. She hadn't expected contact. She narrowed her eyes, adjusted her grip, and signaled for another pitch 2, faster, angrier. Low, and inside wham, the bat connected again. This time the ball hit the edge of the left stands, slamming into the protective netting just above a luxury sponsor suite. A loud metallic clang echoed. The audience gasped. Vivian cursed under her breath. And then came pitch 3. No hesitation, no mercy, full speed, boom. The ball exploded off Elena's bat like it had been waiting its whole life to fly. It arced high into the air, a white blur against the blue sky, then sailed clean over the stadium fence past the sponsor. Banners past the cameras, landing somewhere beyond the outer wall. Dead silence. And then, home run, the announcer's voice broke through the air, cracking with disbelief. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the first home run of the tournament. From the side of the field, an older umpire, Arthur Keene, 65 years old, a veteran of the league, stepped forward, hat low, eyes wide. No one's cleared that wall in 5 years, he whispered. Players stood from the dugouts, phones fell from their hands. The sapphire wristbands that gleamed on the elite's arms now looked dull under the sun. Camille Sloan blinked. Someone near the stands muttered, "Who is she?" Vivian. Sterling didn't move. Her Nike jersey once, a beacon now clung to her like a question she couldn't answer. Elena slowly walked out of the batter's box. She didn't look at the crowd, didn't raise her arms, didn't gloat. She just lowered her bat and looked toward the pavilion, toward the man watching her with quiet pride. Graham Brooks had seen that swing before, and he knew exactly what came next. The air was electric. The grandstands, once a stage for laughter, now held their breath. Spectators stared in stunned silence at the woman who had just shattered every expectation, every insult, every label they had stuck on her like a scarlet letter. Elena Brooks stood at home plate, her thrift-store bat now holy. Her silence louder than any celebration. And then the doors of the VIP pavilion opened. Out stepped a man, tall, understated, in a tailored gray suit, silver cufflinks, no tie. His salt and pepper hair caught the sun, but it was his walk that changed everything. Calm, measured, unstoppable, every head turned, every phone camera followed, because they recognized him. Graham Brooks, founder of Brooks Athletic Holdings, primary investor in the Sierra Ridge League, and a billionaire whose vision had reshaped women's sports in North America. The man who made the tournament possible. The man no one ever questioned, and he was walking straight onto the field. Vivian Sterling took a step back, her smirk gone, her pride unraveling. As Graham approached Elena, lowered her bat, their eyes met. She didn't smile, but something passed between them, a language built not on words, but on years. He reached her, slid an arm around her waist, and kissed her forehead. Gasps rippled through the stadium. Then he turned to face the crowd, the staff, the players, the press. His voice was low, but it struck like thunder. That woman you just mocked for wearing thrift-store sneakers and swinging a second-hand bat. He paused, scanning their stunned faces. She's my wife. Gasps turned into silence. Julian wasn't done. She's also the quiet investor behind this entire league. She helped fund half of what you're standing on. And she didn't ask for credit. She didn't ask for a spotlight. She just believed in the game. Every player who'd laughed, every official who'd tried to remove her, every spectator who filmed her as a joke, they all stood, frozen. Graham's voice sharpened. And today you revealed something far more broken than her bat. You revealed the rot in your arrogance. He turned to Vivian. You just challenged, mocked, and humiliated the biggest sponsor of this tournament. And my wife, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Effective immediately, you're banned from all events sponsored by my organization. That includes every league we fund, every contract we touch, every door you thought you owned. Vivian's face drained of color. No one moved, no one clapped, no one even blinked, because the field had shifted and everyone could feel it. Vivian Sterling didn't speak. Her mouth was slightly open as if the words had gotten stuck halfway out and now refused to come. Graham Brooks stood beside Elena like a thunderclap in human form, calm, controlled, but finally. The silence on the field felt historic, like something sacred had cracked. Then softly, Graham raised a tablet in his hand and tapped the screen. A series of notifications began pinging through the league's digital system. The sound, a metallic chorus of consequence. Every contract associated with today's mockery is now terminated, Graham said loud enough for all to hear. Vivian Sterling, Camille, Sloane, Margaret Ellison, all barred from future league events, effective immediately. Gasps echoed across the field. Up in the luxury booths, agents and managers scrambled to their phones, their screens lighting up with canceled deals and revoked endorsements. A few sponsors began quietly leaving their seats, their faces tight. Down below, Camille Sloane stammered, You can't just—" "I just did," Graham interrupted, not even looking at her. "You mocked the person who gave you a stage to stand on. You used privilege as a weapon. You turned a tournament meant for sport into a circus of cruelty." The audience had stopped pretending they weren't invested. Now they watched with bated breath, hearts caught somewhere between guilt and awe. This event wasn't created for show ponies. Graham continued. It was built for those who love the game, who respect the sport. His gaze swept over the players still seated in the dugout. Many had been laughing earlier. Now they couldn't meet his eyes. You wore the wristbands. You flashed your gear. But none of it made you athletes today. Vivian opened her mouth to speak again, but this time it was Elena who stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You had the spotlight. Vivian, the stage, the privilege. And with all of that, you still chose to humiliate someone. Just for being different. The words hit harder than any swing. I didn't come here to prove anything, I came to play, Elena added. But you made it about status. So, now you've lost it. The crowd didn't cheer. They stood one by one. From the front row to the back, spectators rose to their feet. Not in applause, but in solemn recognition, because the game had just been rewritten, and the ones who once owned the diamond had been sent back to the bleachers. Long before Sierra Ridge ever knew her name, Elena Brooks had already been playing the game. Not in stadiums, not in front of flashing cameras or velvet rope VIP lounges, but in cracked concrete lots behind gas stations and overgrown backyards and community parks with rusted fences and fading chalk lines. She had learned how to swing not from professionals, but from repetition. Thousands of swings under gray skies during lunch breaks between diner shifts or under flickering street lamps after coaching little league boys who used milk crates as bases. At 18, she had nothing but a worn glove, a hand-me-down bat, and a stubborn belief that if she just kept showing up, something would happen. At 22, it did. She met Graham Brooks at a charity event in Detroit. A sandlot game meant to raise funds for girls' athletics. Elena wasn't even on the roster. She was just there to volunteer. But when one of the players dropped out, a coordinator handed her a bat and said, "Can you swing?" She smiled, nodded once, and stepped up to the plate. She hit 2 home runs that day. No warm-up, no training, just fire. Graham had watched from the bleachers hidden behind a coffee cup and sunglasses. No entourage. No one knew who he was, but he saw something in her swing. Not just power, but purpose. And in her eyes, something he hadn't seen in years, grit without ego. They met again, weeks later, then again. And soon, not as strangers. Their love wasn't born in headlines or diamond rings. It was born in quiet dinners, long walks, batting cages, and shared values. No press releases, no magazine spreads. Just vows in a Michigan meadow under a pale sky. Elena never wanted fame. She never asked for credit. When Graham invited her to co-invest in a new women's league, she agreed on one condition. No one would know it was her. She wanted the sport to grow on merit, not marketing. So, she stayed in the background, helped design scholarships, funded inner-city training camps, sponsored equipment for players who couldn't afford a glove. All anonymously. Until today they forced her onto the field, mocked her for the very humility she protected, and now they were finding out who she truly was. Not because she declared it, because she earned it. With a swing forged in forgotten lots, powered by, every time someone said, "You don't belong." The field was still. No commentary, no music, no artificial hype. Just silence, the kind that comes after a storm when the damage is obvious and no one dares to speak. First, Vivian Sterling stood near the dugout, eyes wide, her custom Nike jersey suddenly too tight, too loud, too fake. Her entourage had quietly stepped back. The flash of their sapphire wristbands, no longer symbols of power, but marks of shame. Elena Brooks stood in the center of it all, quiet and unmoved, her thrifted bat still by her side. Then Graham spoke again, his voice cool but unrelenting. There's no place in this league for people who confuse luxury with value, for those who believe image equals integrity. He turned toward the field staff, the players, and the cameras. If you participated in today's humiliation, if you laughed, posted, whispered, your access is revoked, your endorsements, pulled your contracts, shredded, effective now. And then, like a final page in a chapter, he tapped a button on his tablet. A ripple passed through the stadium. Wristbands deactivated, player credentials, wiped names, erased from the tournament roster. One by one, the icons of elitism crumbled. Camille Sloan, former MVP, turned pale as her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and her jaw dropped. My agency just dropped me. A media influencer who had mocked Elena's sneakers began crying quietly. I didn't mean it. It was just a joke, she mumbled. But the cameras were rolling. Her tears were already too late. Even Vivian, proud and silent, took a shaky breath and stepped forward. For the first time all day, she didn't speak like a queen, but like someone who had just discovered the bottom. I was wrong, she whispered. Mrs. Brooks, Elena, I'm sorry. Elena didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She just nodded once. Then a player near third base one, who had said nothing all day, who hadn't joined in the cruelty, did something unexpected. She tore off her sapphire wristband and dropped it on the dirt. Others followed, one by one. Wristbands hit the ground like confessions. The message was clear. The badge of privilege meant nothing now. It had taken one swing to expose the lie. It had taken Elena Brooks and the truth to bring the game back to what it was supposed to be. The dust hadn't even settled yet. Change had already begun to root itself into the bones of Sierra Ridge Park. The same field that once echoed with designer laughter and carefully rehearsed mockery now held a different kind of silence, the kind that follows revelation. The kind that comes right before something new begins. Elena Brooks stood beside Graham, her worn canvas sneakers pressing softly into the infield dirt, her hand resting on the bat that had quite literally changed everything. But it wasn't the swing that transformed the tournament. It was her grace, her restraint, her quiet refusal to be anything but exactly who she was. In the grandstand, media outlets now trained their cameras not on Vivian Sterling or the influencer Rose, but on Elena, the woman they had all dismissed without question. Headlines were already forming. The unknown legend who humbled a league. How a tender bat redefined $1 million game. Not sponsored, not styled, just brilliant. A league official once silent in the chaos now stepped forward, removing his cap as he approached her. Mrs. Brooks, he said, voice low, respectful, changed. On behalf of the board, I'd like to offer you the Sports Fairness Icon Award. Well, no one's ever earned it like this. He held out the crystal trophy. Elena looked at it for a long moment, then with a gentle smile, she accepted it. Not for the applause, but for the message. This wasn't about revenge. It was about resetting the soul of the sport. Graham raised his voice one last time. As of this moment, all policies that enforce visual conformity, dress codes, gear, requirements, branding expectations are suspended. Permanently. He turned to the crowd, to the boardroom executives seated in the upper tiers, to the sponsors whose names still lined the walls. From now on, this field belongs to talent to exert. To those who love the game, not just the camera. In the silence that followed, a slow clap began, unsure at first, then joined by another, and another. Then the entire stadium rose, not for Elena's wealth, not for her husband, but for her truth, for the way she had walked onto a battlefield in nothing but sneakers and resolve and left it rewritten. The velvet dugouts, the wristbands, the mockery, all of it dust now. Because legacy isn't what you wear, it's what you leave behind. The sun had started to dip behind the western ridge, casting long golden rays across the now silent field. The velvet benches were empty. The grandstands had quieted, and Elena Brooks stood at the heart of Sierra Ridge Park. Not as an outcast, not as a curiosity, but as the woman who rewrote everything with a single swing. The sapphire wristbands, forgotten, the headlines, already shifting. The girls watching from the back rows, the ones who had never seen someone like themselves on that field, would remember this day forever. Elena took Graham's hand as they walked toward the exit gates, her worn sneakers soft against the manicured turf. The bat slung gently over her shoulder, not as a weapon, but as a relic, a quiet crown. Graham leaned closer, his voice tender, proud, ready to go home. She nodded, her hazel eyes scanning the field one last time. The space looked different now, not because it had changed physically, but because it had been purified, cleansed by truth. He smiled, she squeezed his hand. Behind them, reporters clamored. Brands rushed forward, endorsements, interviews, speaking engagements, all now on the table. But Elena didn't pause. She didn't need validation from them. As they neared the gate, a girl maybe 10 years old, sitting with a plastic glove too big for her hand, called out softly, "Mrs. Brooks, I want to swing like you." Elena stopped, turned, walked back. She bent down, meeting the girl's wide eyes. "You already can," she said. "You just have to know who you are before they tell you who to be." The girl grinned, her mother misty-eyed, mouthed a silent, "Thank you." And with that, Elena turned again, stepping off the field that had once rejected her, now rewritten by her presence. As they disappeared into the tunnel, a line appeared on the stadium's new digital banner. "You don't need a custom kit to be a champion. You just need to swing, Elena." Brooks didn't raise her voice. She didn't fight back with insults, wealth, or connections. She let her swing speak, and with one perfect hit, she shattered an entire system built on ego status and exclusion. She reminded the world that greatness doesn't always wear designer shoes or come with sponsorship deals. Sometimes it walks in quietly with a second-hand bat and an unshakable sense of who it is. Because dignity when tested doesn't yell, it stands tall, and in the end, the stadium didn't cheer for luxury. It stood for truth. This wasn't just a story about baseball. It was a story about class resilience and how quiet strength can change everything when the world expects you to break. If you believe in stories that uplift, that expose injustice, and that celebrate the power of authenticity, we invite you to stand with us. Like this video. If Elena's story moved you, comment below and tell us, have you ever been underestimated? And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more emotional stories like this, where dignity wins and silence speaks louder than applause. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.